Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Awesome Wholesaler Experience Podcast, where we look into the many facets of the job, the career, and the lifestyle of investment and insurance product wholesaling. I'm your host, the creator of the Awesome Wholesaler Experience Podcast, and yours truly, Awesome Mike. Hey, everyone, in studio today, live in the field. He's a real guy, not a cardboard cutout. Live in the field with our special guest today, Mr. Alan Stein Jr., and let me tell you about him a little bit. He's a speaker, coach, author with an expertise in improving organizational performance, cohesion, and accountability. Now, after graduating from, is it Elon University with a degree in sports management, which is actually a big deal, he spent 15 years working with the highest performing basketball players on the planet, like two-time NBA MVP, NBA Finals MVP, mouth for me to say, Kevin Durant. We all know him as Big KD. So yeah, and you're also a TED Talk veteran, and now Alan teaches companies how to utilize the same strategies in business that elite athletes use to perform at that world-class level. Now, Alan's a dynamic storyteller, and he delivers practical takeaways for his attendees to put into immediate action to become their best selves. Now, in his new book, Raise Your Game, which we have a copy right here, Alan shares with us the secrets of the world's top athletes and what makes them the best of the best. Now, he empowers every audience that he speaks with to win and to achieve higher performance by closing the gap between what they know they should do and what they're actually doing. Alan is famous for his signature question: are the habits you have today on par with the dreams you have for tomorrow? I always love it when my guests are smiling ear to ear after I read their bio.
Yeah, man.
That makes my day. Hey, welcome to the show. Thanks for being on. How are you today?
No, I am fantastic. It's so great to finally connect with you, and I appreciate you making the effort to come out here and fire up the video and the recording.
Yeah, it's in the field, so we're not in the podcast studio. So apologize in advance for any technological difficulties, but I think we're going to have a great show. I got to ask you before we get into it too much. When you look at the Detroit skyline, which building is your favorite? Is it the Willis Tower? Is it the Trump Tower and Hotel? Or is it the John Hancock Center?
Wow. We come right out of the gate strong. Now,
do you know that all of those are in the Chicago skyline, by the way?
You know what's funny? I had a feeling it was a trick question. So when I was actually on my way here, I Googled Detroit skyline, and the first picture that came up actually was of Chicago. I didn't know the difference, so I posted it, and I had a few Michigan friends immediately hit me up and say, "Hey, moron, you just posted the wrong one." I didn't know the difference. So I'm glad I didn't answer your trick question and start off looking like a fool.
Yeah, no, it's always just, it's interesting. I guess that Google said, the picture of the Detroit skyline is it's a little,
so we'll give them Chicago.
Less than desired. Yeah, so they put Chicago in there. But, I appreciate your affinity with basketball players. And even growing up myself, I like to, attempt to play basketball. It was more like, a variation of football. And, but I want to ask you, and this is a commonly debated question. In your opinion, who is the greatest basketball player to ever have played the game?
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan?
And I don't pause. Yeah. And that's what's always funny when we have these discussions. That by no means diminishes the other great players, and it's funny because you can look at the different generations. I had a lot of older coaches that, when I was younger, said that Oscar Robertson was one of the best to ever do it, and they still stand by that. And of course, you've got Wilt Chamberlain and Kareem,
Bill
and
Russell.
then absolutely. And then you move to the Larry and Magic era. Certainly, even Isaiah Thomas. He may not have been as well liked in the media.
Bad boys.
Isaiah Thomas is a remarkable player. And then now you've got the KDs and the LeBron. So it makes for a healthy discussion. But I think when you put everything together at present, I'm going to go with Jordan.
And is it because of the six? That can't be the 6 rings because Russell has 9 rings. What is it that actually makes them stand apart in your opinion?
I think it's a combination of a variety of things. One, and we all have to realize that we have our own biases. And I'm 43 years old, which means when basketball was my absolute number one driving force and focus is when Michael Jordan was at his heyday. So I got to see him live anytime he came to play to DC. I watched him the most. And I think we'll all be a little bit partial to those that we watch, which is why kids today think LeBron is the best, because they didn't get to see Jordan when he was actually doing it live. So I recognize the fact that I've got that bias. But, Jordan kind of bridged the gap when the NBA really exploded, which I give full credit to Bird and Magic for turning it into this kind of global phenomenon. I think we saw the game raise exponentially higher, and Jordan was still the king. The only thing that I would say about some of the pre-1980s players, the competition wasn't as fierce then. And I say this partially in jest, but partially in truth. I mean, half the time Wilt Chamberlain was playing, he had a guy guarding him that was 6'2". You're going to put up stats. When he went up against Bill Russell, he showed that he was actually immortal. But when he played against guys like you and I guarding him, he'd go off for 50. Jordan could never take a night off. He had a legit player guarding him every night, as does LeBron and KD. So I'm still going to give Jordan the nod.
Yeah, and I actually concur, agree. Like, my favorite is Jordan, even though I was a Bad Boys fan, so we hated the Bulls.
Of course.
And but as I've grown up and my views on how to view sports, and we'll get into that a little bit, has kind of evolved. The one thing that stands out is because of Jordan's demeanor.
Yeah.
Like, Jordan has never said, at least I couldn't find it, where he said that he is the greatest player of all time. He's
Correct.
never said that.
Right.
He gives respect to Oscar Robinson and Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. He says, he never got a chance to play against those guys.
Right.
So how can he say he's better than those guys?
Correct.
And that's a stark difference than the many times that LeBron and his cadre have said that they are the best players of all time. And so it's a different mentality. Jordan did say that he probably was on the best team.
Yeah.
And that was the 91 or 92 when he went 72-12.
Yes.
So that was probably the best team he's ever been on. And even that, I mean, the loyalty, the being on one team. I mean, Jordan wore the Bulls jersey. Kobe wore the Lakers jersey. That's a rarity now.
Yes.
I mean, it's different. We'll talk about that in a little bit as far as the culture goes. But tell us about you a little bit. I read there you grew up in D.C.
Yep.
So are you a city guy? Were you playing on the courts in D.C.?
I'm a suburbs guy.
Suburbs guy?
Yeah, so I was probably 30 minutes from downtown D.C., so
Okay.
I grew up in the suburbs. But, basketball was absolutely my first identifiable passion. I fell in love with the game of basketball at 4 or 5 years old, and here I am almost 4 decades later, and it's still a major staple in my life. So I'm incredibly grateful and thankful that I've had an opportunity to build a life and a career around the game that I love so much, and was able to be a fairly decent public high school player in the DC area, and then played at college, as you mentioned, at Elon. And then as soon as I graduated, knew that I wanted to make my living in basketball. But in the late 90s, there weren't near as many opportunities to do that. I mean, for the most part, most people that love the game decided to be a teacher and then coach high school basketball. And I found out very quickly I wasn't near as passionate about the teaching half of that equation. I just wanted to be in the basketball realm. So I decided to become at that time, we would say a strength and conditioning coach. It's now kind of elevated to a performance coach because it encompasses more than just strength and just conditioning. And I did that for almost 20 years before making this leap over to the corporate side to translate everything I'd learned through sport into sales and into business.
Well, a lot of the listeners on the call or on the show or viewing the show today are in the financial services environment. They're either financial advisors or spokesmen and women for investment companies.
Love it.
We call them they're field territory sales reps. We call them wholesalers. So they're going to benefit from hearing the performance mentality. But how did it get planted in you? Was there a coach or a teacher or someone that when you were a child growing up that kind of caused you to become an athlete and a competitor and was a mentor of yours?
There were several. And one of the neat parts about us being here in Detroit right now for this thing called the IYCA, which is the International Youth Conditioning Association, is the gentleman that's the president. I met him 20 years ago, almost to the day, right when I was getting ready to leave Elon. And he was the strength and conditioning coach at Detroit Mercy. And this is still in the infancy of the internet. So I had read a few things on him, and I bought a ticket to come out to a conference he was holding and met him. And his name's Jim Kilbasso. He's the one that's the president putting on this event. And he had a very profound impact on the way that I viewed performance, on the way that I viewed coaching, and that showed me that it was a very viable profession, that it wasn't just something that moms and dads volunteered to do part-time, that you could actually make a living pouring into young people and into athletes. And at that point, I was hooked. I knew this is exactly what I was meant to do.
And does he have a particular philosophy? You know, I was listening to something about the difference between Coach K, Mike Krzyzewski, and Roy Williams.
Yes.
And, you know, Coach K is the disciplinarian.
Yep.
And Roy Williams is more, I guess, of a cheerleader, or, you know, he's still a very, you know, forceful leader.
Yeah.
But was there something that Kielbasa had put into you, or a philosophy?
Well, you know, and there's been several people, excuse me, that have helped with that. And ultimately, and I know the word authentic kind of gets played out and it's a little bit cliche, but there's a lot of truth to that word. And it's about becoming the best coach that you're capable of based on having the self-awareness and emotional intelligence to know, you know, Coach K is legendary because he's in his lane and he knows that being a fierce disciplinarian is what matches his skill sets and his personality best, where Coach Williams knows that that's not in his best, you know, interest to coach in that way. So as a young coach, and I think everyone goes through this, even as a young sales professional, where you probably try to emulate those that you look up to. So a young coach trying to be Coach K is probably a normal rite of passage, but the sooner you can get through that and become yourself and not try to be anyone else, learn from others, but don't try to be others, is really powerful. And I remember that, you know, my first few years in coaching, I was basically a hodgepodge of all of these different mentors and coaches I'd have. You know, I don't think I had an original thought for those first few years. And then you grow out of that. You develop some confidence. You start to have your own convictions and your own philosophy. And then, you know, then you're able to become your own person. And that's a very liberating and freeing experience. You still try to sharpen your saw at all times and learn and grow, but you're not so worried about being someone else.
Yeah, sharpen the saw. That's habit number 7. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. I'm a big fan of Stephen Covey.
Absolutely.
I cut my hair like him.
As we all should be.
The rest of his soul. He passed away a couple of years ago. But,
yeah.
But we go to the same barber. We did, anyways. It's just interesting though. Can you translate that to corporate America? Like, would it be advisable for a young financial advisor, a young wholesaler, to find someone to kind of emulate as they develop their own style, or is that going to be a little bit of a challenge?
It's a yes and a no. I believe that it's important to have a North Star and a guiding light that of someone that you aspire to be similar to, someone that has the values, the beliefs, the work ethic that you want to be able to emulate. But the key is realizing, and once again, sounds cliche, you know, we're all like snowflakes or you know, fingerprints, where we're all different. And
I am not a snowflake.
You are not a snowflake. You're a big thumbprint. How about that? That's who you are. And it's important that we don't try to be someone else, that we learn. And that's why I can say, you know, with my own personality and my own self-awareness and my own convictions, that I can learn from Coach K and I can learn from Coach Roy Williams. Even though they're very different, I can still pull things from each one of them that fit into my model as a coach. So, but I do think that's part of the process. You know, a lot of young coaches try to emulate the coach that was most impactful to them. So if their high school coach was very impactful, they start coaching very similar to how their high school coach coached them. And same thing from a college standpoint. And even as a parent of 3 young kids, I think most young parents, and I'm not talking about their age, I'm talking about when your kids are young, usually in some way, shape, or form mimic the parenting that you experienced as a child, unless it was, you know, really poor and you decide to break that circle. So I think that's just part of the process.
Yeah, in fact, as I'm thinking, you know, Coach K's mentor was Bobby Knight.
Bobby Knight, yes.
Who was the biggest, softest teddy bear that there is.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe not. But you can see how that happens. You know, I want to get your opinion on a couple of things that are dealing with sport.
Sure.
And you know, the first one is, what is up with all of the trash talking? Like, if you look at the greatest players, maybe even the not so great players, it's hard to find one that wasn't a master trash talker. And I actually, you know, I've been told I have a way with words myself, but I actually am not a fan of it. I'm more of a fan of the game. Like instead of watching Mike Tyson completely dismantle Leon Spinks in the weigh-ins, Spinks was terrified. 91 seconds, he got flat on his back. Michael Spinks was a legitimate killer.
Yes. But
Tyson had won. I mean, he beat him in the ring too, but Jordan, it's you know, legacy is that he will talk you into a tailspin. What is your opinion about trash talking? Is it necessary? Is it a part of the game? Or is it something else? Is it a mask for a lack of self-esteem? Is it call it I guess, ultra urban, and I mean that in a disparaging way, technique to survive? What is it? What's the deal with trash talking?
From the players that I've studied and those that I've talked to, there's two reasons to do it. One reason is more internal, that it actually fires you up, that finding a reason to almost get angry because you have the self-awareness to know that you actually play better in an angered state is one reason to do it. The other is what you mentioned which would be external, which is I believe it's going to throw you off your game. So if I'm matched up with you all night and you're thinking about what I'm saying and you're not thinking about your execution and what you're supposed to do, then that gives me an advantage. And so I think if it's done through either one of those lenses where there's actually some thought and some strategy behind it, I guess some of it you could chalk up to being part of the game. I think a lot of what we see today is this false bravado, this everybody look at me, I'm going to talk a big game, and it's I don't believe in that. For me, I'm not a trash talker. I never have been. That's just not parallel with my personality. And, I'm more of a person that I would just rather my results speak for themselves, and let people make their own inferences that I don't think one needs to say it. But that also, I believe in a lot of the things that we do, and especially in sales and in business and in speaking, humility is an incredibly endearing characteristic. It's a connective tissue that draws people in. And I think many times, being brash and trash talking is the exact opposite of that. It can be a repellent for what you do. But I remember, Jordan would talk about, he would try to find things that would make him mad just to get him motivated, because sometimes the game was just boring to him because he was so good at it. So I think it's neither here nor there. I do think it's exacerbated big time now with social media, where all of this stuff is kind of brought to light. One of the things that made Larry Bird so awesome, and he was one of the most effective trash talkers in the history of the game, but he wasn't doing it for public consumption. He would just go over and whisper to you, like, yeah, I'm going to catch the ball right there and shoot it in your face, and there's nothing you can do about it. There was only one person in the arena that knows he was trash talking, and it was the guy that he was, matched up against. So that was different. Today, I think players want to do it so that they can get the likes and the views, and they want everyone to know, hey, me, look at me. So yeah, for me, it doesn't really fit in harmony with who I am as a person and what I'm trying to achieve. But you can't really argue with Jordan or Bird's results.
Or Trump's.
Yeah, I had a feeling we were going to go in that direction. Yeah, and it's
love him, hate him, and even the politicians before him. And for years, it's been this. It gets ugly quickly.
Yeah.
And in the sales business, we talk, hey, don't trash your competitors.
Right.
Be humble. Be mean. But the stats don't support that. Right. And then you mentioned being humble. We talk about Jordan being the greatest basketball player of all time. Who would you say? In the color TV era, in the color TV era, who is the greatest athlete of all time? Any sport.
This is always an interesting one because it comes back to how do you define athlete? Sure. Some people define athlete as if Jordan took off the sneakers and put on a football helmet would be a good football player. If he did that, and he did play some baseball, obviously, like, can you do a multitude of different sports at a high level? Mm-hmm. Other people look at it simply as the metrics, almost like a decathlon. Like, how fast can you run? How high can you jump? What is your hand-eye coordination? So when you put all of there've been so many. Whether it's Bo Jackson or Herschel Walker, or a Michael Jordan. In today's game, LeBron, Russell Westbrook, some of these guys are some of the best athletes that I think you could see. It would be almost impossible to pick.
Well, what I was getting at? What I was getting at is, and maybe I should have said, who is the best or the most winning athlete?
Oh,
and the guy that comes to mind is Floyd Mayweather.
Yeah,
and
he was pretty dominant.
He's very humble and he's a very shy guy. No, he's not.
No.
But he actually has a huge fan base with his demeanor, with his attitude. Yeah. A lot of people don't like him as well.
Yes.
But I think that he went from Pretty Boy Floyd to Money Mayweather, and that's when his entire life really exploded.
Yeah.
He became a less interesting boxer. He broke his hands because he was hitting guys before.
Yeah.
And then he became less interesting. He's more of a defensive player, more of I'm going to win every 12-round decision.
Yeah.
He took Conor McGregor for 10 rounds.
Right.
Back in his earlier days, it would have been 90 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see, on the corporate end of things, we're trying to be more civilized.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll even tell you, Al, there was a group that came on the scene, and they were a bottle rocket and they blew up. But they literally had no remorse and took no prisoners and they gained market share.
Interesting.
It won for them. I think we all. And here's the last thing I'll ask your opinion about.
Yeah, because I do have a few thoughts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, back to Trump. I don't really dive into politics and so forth.
Yeah.
I think part of the issue that some people have with him is, are the people he's picking fights with and he's blasting, is that really where his focus should be when he's leading the free world? I mean, he'll get into some Twitter conversations and he's blasting people that you really shouldn't be worried about that when we have a lot of bigger issues. So sometimes I think it could be, hey, are you being distracted by getting in some of these petty arguments when in theory you should be thinking of other things? I was also taught very early, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, but it's something I've always internalized, that it's often important to be liked just as much as it is to be respected, because being liked will help you get through times that are pretty tough. And that doesn't mean that you pander for people's affection. That doesn't mean that you change who you are in order to get people's approval. But I do believe that people, especially in sales or in business, they'll give you more of a benefit of the doubt if you just come across as a likable person. And I think if most of what you spit is a venom and a vitriol where you're always bashing other people, it's hard to really like a person like that on a regular basis. So that's just something to think about. For me, as a speaker, I have very strong opinions about certain things, but I know what things are appropriate to share and what things aren't, because I don't ever want to be divisive. I want the stuff that I share in my book and in my speaking to include as many people as possible, to fill their buckets and to help them. And if I say something that could turn a portion of the population off, then I don't get a chance to serve them. And to me, this is just me speaking, that's more important than me publicly voicing my opinions on certain things. If you and I go out and grab a drink tonight, I'll happily share my stance on anything that you want to ask me. But I don't put all of that in public because I don't want to create a divisive atmosphere where I can't serve as many people. And the last thing I'll say from a sports standpoint, what would be interesting to see is if Floyd Mayweather happened to lose a fight, what would happen after that? Because two of the biggest downfalls we've ever seen, and one of them has been completely resurrected now, is Mike Tyson and is Tiger Woods. Both of those guys thought they were invincible, that it was impossible to lose. And when both of them lost, they went into a tailwind. They went into a spiral, which means they didn't necessarily believe all of the stuff they were saying. It was part of what they needed to get them in that mindset. I listened to Mike Tyson was interviewed by Joe Rogan, and Mike Tyson said that Cus D'Amato started taking him in for hypnotism at like 13 or 14. I mean, he was literally brainwashed into believing that he was indestructible and could not lose. And I think that led to the complacency leading up to the Buster Douglas fight, where he just thought if he stepped in the ring, he would win, and he didn't. And then he lost, 5 or 6 times after that? And then I know Tiger, a lot of what caused his downfall was off the green indiscretions, but it showed him that he was human and that he was fallible, and it's taken him a decade to get back on top. So I would be fascinated to see that if Mayweather lost, 1, would he own it, or would he deflect and make excuses? And 2, would he be able to get right back on top, or would he start questioning everything that he had been saying?
Yeah, that's a very interesting in introspection or way to view that. It's a good. Appreciate that.
Sure.
So I also wonder, if you agree with the statement that the reason why we like a team or we like an athlete is because we see reflections of ourself in them. And that's why people get so wrapped up into it. When their player or their team wins, they are on cloud 9, because it's almost like they see themselves as being a part of that. And then the same way in a negative response, if their team loses, I mean, you've seen it where guys just are in the dumps, and it's like, well, dude, you didn't even go to the game live. You watched it on TV. How can that have such an impact on you? What's about sports that causes us to do that?
Well, the theater and the dramatics behind sports are very compelling. I think usually a lot of what ties us in and draws us into sports is not even just what's on the field or court. It's the storyline outside of that. And yes, if I come from very humble beginnings or a low socioeconomic area, and I see someone that I really look up to rise above that, come from a similar situation, and now they're having success, yeah, I think I would see part of me in that. It would give me hope. It would give me some excitement. Some of it, I think, is just pure geography. I think there's certain pockets of like if you grow up in the New England area, I think they make you be a Patriots and a Red Sox fan. I don't even think you have a choice. I think it's stamped at birth. You have to root for these teams. And when you grow up, your parents and your uncles and your grandparents, they probably liked the same team. So it's almost as if it's a parental way of life.
Yeah,
almost. And, then it could also be something where, if your father played for Duke basketball, you're probably going to have an affinity for Duke basketball just growing up, because that's who you were around. That's who you cheered for. So I do find that very compelling. For me personally, I root for the guys that I have relationships with because I've worked with them. So I always want them to do well. But it's always funny to me because I believe happiness is a choice. I believe it's one that we have to choose to make. And I don't ever give that power to someone else. So as much as I may want a team to win, if they lose, I don't lose an ounce of sleep that night, because I would never give my power of happiness and hand that over to, let's say, 15 strangers on a basketball team. And that's just me. So I've never quite been able to internalize how a team could lose and that ruins somebody's entire weekend or day. But that's just me. And I don't say that from judgment. I just say, for me, it doesn't matter. I mean, I have the teams I like and I root for, and if they don't win, that's okay.
What about haters? In the investment business,
no shortage of them.
Yeah, you might be lucky to have what we call a big business card.
Yeah.
So if you work for one of the firms that is, a global titan, you could be mediocre, frankly, and dominate someone who may be a great salesperson, but their company just doesn't. So oftentimes that person over here will end up hating the larger company. What do you think about haters? I have my own opinion about them. But what's your opinion on a hater? Why do they do it? And is it productive? And
more times than not, they do it from an insecurity on themselves, that there's something about themselves that they don't like, and they don't have the emotional palate to be able to do anything other than try to take someone else down. I mean, we were talking about the Detroit skyline. I mean, you can either work hard to build the tallest building, or you can try to knock down all of the buildings around so that yours is the tallest. And I guess it's just personal philosophy. I'm a building builder. I'm someone that wants to raise the game and build others up. So I don't believe in hating. I mean, I try to keep my entire life focused on the things that I can control. And I don't control what you do, what you say. I don't control how much success you're having. So I don't spend any time worrying about it. I also believe in coming from a place of abundance, that there's enough out there for all of us to be successful. So I don't think that it's mutually exclusive, that if you got this deal, there's no more for me. Congratulations, you got this deal. I'm going to go find some others. And it also parallels what I teach my young children about bullying. Bullying is rampant with young kids today, especially now online. And I tell them that bullying is 100% unacceptable at all times. However, it's also important to have a little compassion and empathy for a bully, because more times than not, that bully is hurting. There's something inside of them that is hurting so much that they can't think of anything else to do other than hurt someone else. And many times these haters, whether it's in person or on social, they don't know what else to do. There's something about themselves that they don't like, and there's something about their situation and circumstances that they don't like, and they can't think of anything else to do but try to bring you down. And once again, I don't give them that power. If someone tries to hate on me, that's okay. I'll take it with a smile and tell them thank you very much. And I just keep on rolling, because I don't give them the satisfaction of knowing that it could have any impact on me, because I don't let it.
Is that a new thing? I mean, is that something that you've always had? That sounds like an old, wise person talking.
It took some maturity and some improved emotional intelligence to get there. I won't lie. Absolutely. In my early 20s, I would want to go outside and fist fight any hater. I'd want to put my heels in the sand and say, this is what I believe. And if you don't like it, that's on you. But I realized that gets you nowhere. And on social, I've absolutely learned, you're not changing somebody else's mind. You and I can debate on Facebook all we want. And in the end, all we'll have done is both get angry, because you'll still believe what you believe and I still believe what I believe. So I don't think it's worth it. So I know this sounds so just kind of cosmic and esoteric and a little bit too touchy-feely. I'd rather put care and love out in the world than hate. So I do my best to stay focused on that.
Yeah, one of your best philosophies that I've enjoyed is the idea that you only have so many grains of sand. And to spend that sand arguing with someone that has their own agenda, but neither one of you are going to get anything positive out of it, it's kind of silly. I like to, especially with college basketball, I like to root for a good game.
Yeah.
And this year in the tournament, I'm a long-term, I almost say lifelong Duke fan because of Coach K.
Absolutely.
And in the Fab Five at Michigan, who turned me off because I was a big fan. But the way that they behaved in their losses, I couldn't see myself in that.
Yeah.
So I was really turned off by that. I said, I don't like that. And then I looked and I saw Duke, and saw them, how they pulled together as a team, and then they won. And I want to, I at that age, I viewed myself as being a winner. I still am a winner now, but I know that it doesn't matter whether Duke wins or loses. I'm still a winner.
Yes,
they
absolutely.
played Michigan State this year.
Yes,
and I like Michigan State.
I do too
as well.
I love Izzo.
I told my kids, I said, well, I'm rooting for Duke, but if Duke doesn't win, I hope Michigan State does.
You hedged
right?
your bet perfectly.
Right. Yeah. And I really wanted that. Like there are some people that are in my close circle that they always hate Duke.
Yeah.
No matter who Duke plays, they
Yes.
hate Duke. And it's interesting to see their mentality and their persona. And we actually have, distanced a bit.
Yeah.
Because I feel like it's an attack, like,
Well,
I'm not Duke, right? You know
right.
what I mean? Yeah. So.
Well, I'm fascinated. I've always been fascinated by people that just hate on someone simply because they're successful and consistent. And you could say the same thing for the Patriots. There's people that loathe Tom Brady and Bill Belichick. And I've just never understood that. I understand having an allegiance to your team. I understand rooting for whoever you want, but I've never understood rooting against someone simply because they're successful, simply because they've shown that consistently they stick to the process, and that's why they win. And it's always been fascinating to me. I just think that's a colossal waste of our time.
I think it's a tearing the buildings down strategy.
Yes.
And
there's nothing wrong for rooting for underdogs.
Right.
In fact, there have been times, when it was several years ago when Duke actually lost to Lehigh, as saddened as I was that Duke didn't win, that was great for college basketball.
Oh, yeah.
And that was something for those kids at Lehigh that they'll remember for the rest of their lives. So I was actually okay with it and had no problem with it. Yeah, I've just never understood that.
So I asked your opinion about who's the best basketball player.
Yeah.
Who would be the best basketball coach? And we'll just go with, you can go pros too, but who would be your all-time best basketball coach?
I stick with Coach K. And once again, I've been drinking the Kool-Aid for a while.
Yeah.
I mean, and I do find it funny because when we have any of these conversations, people say, well, if I say Coach K, then that means I don't think highly of John Wooden, or I don't think highly of some of these other coaches that have done things at a high level. And no, that's not the case. I mean, you've got your Mount Rushmore. I think one of the things that makes Coach K remarkable is the longevity and the consistency that he's been able to do it. He's been able to do this as long as I've been alive. I mean, he spanned 4 decades, and the game has changed. Kids have changed. College basketball has become a big business now, the advent of social media. So he went from, winning in the late 80s with Johnny Dawkins and Jay Billis to winning 30, 40 years later with an entirely different group. And I think that, speaks volumes to him. And I've read, watched, and listened to just about everything that he's ever done. So I feel that I have a very good understanding of who he is as a coach. Certainly John Wooden was absolutely remarkable, but one could make the argument that college basketball wasn't as competitive or had as much parity when he won those championships. There was a couple of other teams that were decent, and now because college basketball is such a big time business, I just think there's more competition, and that in no way disparages John Wooden. He is legendary. He is Hall of Fame. He is iconic, and he should get credit for laying the foundation for most of coaches today, but I still go with Coach K.
Well, I would as well, but recently I've been really giving it some thoughts, and it was really magnified when Duke played Michigan State, because I knew every player on Duke's roster before they became a Duke player, because they're number 1 McDonald's All-Americans. They're the top drafted team. I didn't know anybody on Michigan State, yet they beat. So I actually almost would say, is it a better accomplishment to take a bunch of, call them non-superstars and coach them to success, as opposed to being a great, almost a recruiting machine to get those number 1 players?
It's something to look at. But that's actually one of the reasons that I find Coach K fascinating, is when you look at the teams of the past, the Christian Laettners and the Shane Battiers and those guys stayed 3 or 4 years. Like this, there was never the one and done. Now, part of that was because of the NBA's rules, the collective bargaining agreement, but he did that. And then once they changed the rules where someone could come for 1 year, he was pretty adamant about the fact that he did not want to coach a player that was only going to come for 1 year, but realized very quickly that in a game like basketball, talent wins. and that if he didn't go after the top blue chippers, the top 12 to 15 players, he was going to have to play against them. So he changed his philosophy and started recruiting those guys, and still had pretty good success. I mean, John Calipari has the very same model, and he's had pretty good success as well. You know, we also can't look at winning the national title as the only barometer for being successful. I mean, when you look at Coach K, at present, right this moment, there are more Duke alum in the NBA than any other team in college basketball. So that's one marker of success. You know, obviously he has the 5 national championships and the 10, 11 Final Fours and all of those things. So when you look at it from a statistical standpoint, you look at what his guys do afterwards, you know, and I'll still say that. But with many of these, it's like 1A and 1B. I love Tom Izzo. You know, Tom Izzo told me, I interviewed him one time in person, and he said something that impacted me forever. And that is a player coach team will always outperform a coach team in the long run. And he talked about he recruits guys that are leaders. He recruits guys that can coach themselves, where he's kind of the conductor of the orchestra, but they police each other and hold each other accountable. And for a guy that is the face of Michigan State basketball, I thought that was remarkable. And I really took that to heart. So there's so many of these guys that do it at a great level. And I'm just talking about college basketball. I mean, Bill Belichick, you can hate that guy all you want. He's phenomenal. And all of these guys have one similar theme. They stick to the basics. They don't try to level up until they've mastered the basics and the fundamentals. And to me, that's something that all of us can and should learn from.
Well, I definitely want to get into that, and in particular, sure. Your time with Kobe and his camp. But before we do, though, last thing about these coaches, would you consider, like, I almost look at it like Coach K and Phil Jackson. You know, Phil Jackson was lucky because he had Michael Jordan and then Scottie Pippen, and then all those guys came together. So was Phil Jackson the reason, or was he the benefactor? You know, Michael Jordan was already a Legion type of a ball player, but then he didn't win under Doug Collins.
Correct. So that's exactly where I was headed with this.
It's an interesting discussion.
I think he is a part of the reason. I would not give him full credit, because that would be undermining what all of the players did. But no, I don't think he was just a benefactor. People fail to realize how hard it is to coach talent, how hard it is to get alpha males, and I just say that loosely. Of course, we could be talking about females, like the best of the best, to gel together, to get people to take a subservient role that's less than what they think they should be doing. You know, that takes a lot of brilliance, and Phil Jackson was a master at being able to manage these egos. And you hit it perfectly. As great as he was, Jordan didn't win squat until he started to listen to Phil and take Phil's coaching on, here's how you can make everyone else better. Because ultimately, I think that should be the number one thing we look at with an athlete. It should not be their stats, their wins and losses, their championships. It should be, do they make those around them better? And the answer to that is, if you do that, you will win and you will put up good stats. And that would also be one of the reasons that I would say Jordan would get my vote slightly over LeBron. Is I think Jordan made his players better than LeBron does. And I don't say that to disparage him. That's just the way that I view it.
Yeah, and we got to move on, but I can talk basketball forever.
I know, we sure could.
Because I'm thinking, okay, Karl Malone and John Stockton might have made a lot of it, but they have Barkley's number of rings, which is 0.
Which is the same as you and I have.
Exactly. I got a little ring on the collar. But, and kind of in line with these athletes, and last thing we can talk about them, probably not, but Barkley said it first, I think, at least that I heard of it. He said he got in trouble. He said something or he did something, and they said, "Chuck, you're a role model for these kids." He said, "I'm not a role model." What do you think about that? Are people in the media, athletes, spokesmen, people in the media, coaches, are they role models, or are they just supposed to be winners?
It's both. By default, they're going to be put on a pedestal and have the expectations of a role model. So I believe they should act accordingly. You know, to whom much is given, much is expected. If you're going to be given the money and the fame and the attention of being an athlete, I think you should do your best to carry yourself with high character, because there are people that look up to you, young people. However, it's not his job to raise your kids or my kids or society's kids. It's not his job to live a life just so that, he can please others. So I think it's both. I mean, that ended up being, you know, an iconic tagline, and Nike ran with that, and from a marketing standpoint. But same thing on social media. Now, I mean, I have a platform. I mean, it's minuscule compared to these rich and famous and athletes, but I have a platform on social media, and I believe I need to do a service of having that platform, that I need to make sure that I'm putting out positive stuff, that I'm putting out quality stuff that's going to add value, because there are people that are watching. And yes, there's a lot fewer people that are watching me than we're watching Charles Barkley, but every person matters. And I've always believed, and this is so true in sales, how you do anything is how you do everything. So I don't think it'd be very appropriate for me to give this keynote tomorrow morning and talk about all of these things, and then behind the curtain, you see that I do the exact opposite of all that. That I'm not high character, that I don't practice what I preach. To me, that would be a major disconnect and a major problem. So who I am right now on your show, who you'll see me on stage tomorrow, and who I am in my life, there's tremendous alignment. Now, do I have bad days? Of course. And I don't post those on social. You know, everybody's going to have an off moment. But to my core, I make sure that I'm the same person, whether the lights and cameras are on or they're not. And that consistency and authenticity is how I view character. So for somebody like Charles, you know, it's not for me to judge him what he should and shouldn't do, but he's been given a certain amount of responsibility that I think he should have taken more seriously, or maybe with a different light.
Yeah, I'll give him a pass too, because I believe that he was caught off guard, and that was his knee-jerk reaction.
For sure.
And now he
still sticks with it.
Now he's the big teddy bear.
Yeah.
And he's just, you know, I think that he actually is a role model, but not to every kid
right
that's out there. It's interesting.
But even normal guys like you and I should aim to be role models in everything that we do. Because another thing that I've learned, you never know who's watching.
Yep.
You and I don't know every single person that will listen to this. And someone could be listening to this right now and will be impacted by what you and I say. And we can either fill their bucket or we can drain it. We can either do something that lights them up and gets them excited and makes them move towards positive action, or we can say something that's going to undermine them and cut their knees off. And we have to take responsibility for that. So I don't this, again, I said it before, but I will say it again. This doesn't mean that we're pandering for affection, that we don't have to do things just based on approval. Neither you or I are puppets that are just trying to do stuff to please others. But I do believe when we have a platform and we have a voice, we should do everything we can to use that voice for good and to lift others up.
Another soundbite I want you to give me your opinion on. Man, we're talking about practice. Allen Iverson.
AI.
Famous quote. What do you think about that?
I've actually heard from a few people, and I think there was a documentary that he did, that was slightly taken out of context, that when you put the big picture together, he wasn't refuting practice. He had something very personal going on in his life that caused him to not be able to give his full attention at practice, and that was basically his response. So I think it was taken out of context. The average person thinks you've got a Hall of Fame NBA player that's saying practice isn't important, that let's just play the games. So I don't think that is what was intended or what he meant. But if that was, I don't believe in that. I believe practice is where we earn our stripes, where we sharpen our saw. This is how we get good at anything. And the best coaches I've been around, most of them say they actually prefer practice to games, because that's where they're in the trenches being a practitioner, where they're coming up with strategy, they're developing a solid relationship with their players. The games are just kind of the result of your practices. But in AI's defense, I don't think he meant that, because I've heard from some people, he was a dog in practice. He would bust his butt in practice. He was competitive. He went hard. So I do think that soundbite was taken slightly out of context. But no, practice is vital for all of us. And this is one thing I found very fascinating, especially in sales, and would love your take on it since you're the expert. I know that in sport, the closer we can simulate the game in practice, the higher the transfer will be. So you should practice game situations in practice so that they become more natural during the game. Well, same thing in sales. Like, I believe sales professionals should be doing role playing, should be doing certain things where we when I'm sitting down with you and I'm trying to propose something to you, this isn't the first time that I'm going through this. I've rehearsed it. I've practiced it. I've had my colleagues come up with potential objections that you might, and how will I, overcome those? And I think, to some people that may sound a little hokey, like, hey, let's go role play for a few minutes. That's what practice is. And the elite sales professionals that I've been around all believe in it.
I totally concur. In fact, I created a thing for a previous company that I worked with. We called it Iron Night.
Love it.
As an iron sharpens an iron, so a man sharpens another man.
Yep.
And it was designed for just the field guys to give their presentation to their worst critic, which is the other field guy. Because you can't sugarcoat it. I know the real deal. You can't tell me something and I miss it or whatever, and you say it's 7.325 and I know it's not.
No.
I'm going to call you on that.
Yes.
Or an audience that doesn't know might be like, oh wow.
Right.
So we created that, and it was very fruitful, very nerve-wracking. So, and like you mentioned about the practicing, most of the good work in that scenario was done in preparation.
Absolutely.
Because of the fear for the embarrassment by your peer group, and also the chance to kind of compete with your peer group in a protected environment. So
yes,
I think that all teams should do that, whether it's a sports team or if it's a sales team.
For sure. I had a chance to sit down with Mark Cuban several years ago, and I interviewed him. And one thing that I loved about him, and he's another fairly polarizing guy with viewpoints, but he basically said, look, my goal is to always be the most prepared person in any room I walk into. Like, I don't care what room I'm walking into. I don't care what the theme or topic is. I will do my research ahead of time to make sure I'm the most prepared. I might not be the smartest. I might not be the best, but I will always be the most prepared because it's something I have heavy influence on. And that really stuck with me. And then same thing from a practice standpoint. If we have a sales team and I jump on a sales call, if the call goes really well, I should come back and share that with you guys. Hey, here are the things that went well. Maybe that'll add value to your next call because we're teammates. If it didn't go well, they threw me a curveball that I did not see coming, then I should be able to share that as well and say, guys, boy, I really dropped the ball today. Here's what happened to me. I want to share this with you so that you can be prepared so it doesn't happen to you. And I think lots of times sales professionals kind of get in a silo of thinking it's just them and it's nobody else. And I once, very similar to what we were talking about earlier, I don't believe in that. I believe we should always be trying to fill other people's buckets, and it doesn't take anything away from you. Even if your entire livelihood is built on your own sales commission, if you have a mindset of abundance, then you'll be fine. You helping me out is in by no way going to take anything off of your bottom line. And when you work for an organization, that's all part of the practice and the preparation.
Yeah, and I believe that stems from the top. And in the organizational management can create a culture of cross-pollination, of trust. You know, the last thing you want to do is confide in someone that you had a struggle and it actually hurts your career path.
Yeah.
Not only, you have to be vulnerable yourself, but some guys might worry about that. I think it's actually a very immature way to think of it. Sophomoric, let's say.
Absolutely.
You mentioned you did some time with Kobe Bryant, and I mean that intentionally. The quick of the story is that you wanted to watch his individual practice. He said he'll be there. He goes at 4. You said something to the effect of, well, we have a thing at 3:30. And he's like, no, 4 a.m. So you show up there at 3:30 to a lit gym with balls bouncing, to squeakers. It's Kobe. He's already there.
Yeah.
How did that impact you? What did you think about that?
Well, so back in 2007, Nike started something called the Summer Skills Academies, and they took their best players and decided to build position-specific camps around their best players to impact the high school and college players that they knew wanted to emulate them. And this was the very first one. And Kobe, what was so impactful about that was what he said to me after, because what was most important, not even was just time of day, was that most of the initial drills he was doing were very basic. And now he still did them with very high intensity. He did them with tremendous precision, but the stuff he was doing was basic. And that really surprised me. I expected that the best player in the world was going to be doing some flashy stuff. I figured he'd be in there, juggling fireballs blindfolded or doing something really crazy. And he was just doing the basics. And when I asked him later, he said, the reason I'm the best player in the world is because I never get bored with the basics. And that had a profound impact on my life. And what it did was it taught me that just because something is basic, it doesn't mean that it's easy. Those are not synonyms, yet most people treat them as if they are. I can tell you right now that what it takes to be an elite world-class basketball player is very, very basic, but none of it's easy. What it takes to be a world-class sales professional is incredibly basic, but as we both know, certainly not easy. So it's important that we separate those two things. But in order to raise your game or to be the master of your craft, you absolutely positively have to have a respect and appreciation for the basics. And you can't leave them. They need to be a foundational component of everything that you do.
So almost a part of your ritual.
Absolutely, without question.
All right, so that was at softball, because I want to congratulate you for the number 600 and I'm assuming 51 days of your Headspace app usage.
Yes, it is.
That's a long time, my friend.
It's a nice streak.
That's a long time. Tell us about the value of rituals, and then if you would share with us about meditation. A lot of people don't understand or practice it.
We are our habits. I mean, ultimately, our success, our happiness, our fulfillment, our significance, all of it's basically a result of our habits. It's the things we choose to do every single day. And once again, something like doing a 10-minute meditation every day is very, very basic. It's not easy to do. Now, thankfully, I'm kind of past that learning curve. Now it's pretty natural to me. I mean, I've got a few streaks that are longer. One of them's making my bed. I've been making my bed for the last 25, 26 years. You could go check my hotel room right now. Bed is made. And someone would come in to make my bed later if I chose not to make it at a hotel, and I still do it because I believe in starting my day with an act of discipline. That's just that's just a system for me, and meditation is starting to follow suit. So it's our rituals and the way that we prepare is vital. I have a pregame routine before every talk that I give, and I will go through that tomorrow before I give the keynote because it puts me in the right frame of mind. It gets me prepared mentally, emotionally, and physically to give my best. You know, as a speaker, I'm there in service of the audience. I owe it to them to give them the best that I'm capable of. And I've learned over time how to tweak my pregame ritual to make sure that I'm in a state where I can be my best. That doesn't mean every talk is a home run, but it means that it's never from lack of preparation and ritual. And I think everyone right now listening to this, I can guarantee you, you have a morning and an evening routine. I promise you, you do. The question is, did you design it with intention, or did you just walk backwards into it? That's the only question I have. We are creatures of habit as human beings. So we might as well fill our buckets with as many positive habits as possible.
I almost trying to interrupt you and said,
no, that's okay.
Guaranteed.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Rasheed Wallace.
Yes.
Back in the day, guaranteed.
Yes. Love it.
Anyways, it's very interesting. You're the second guy besides myself. So you're the first guy that I've met that actually says he makes his bed in the hotel room. Why do you do that?
Well, if you want to know the real story, this is almost kind of comical. Shows you what a simpleton I am. Back in my early 20s, I read a book. It was called The Millionaire Mindset. And somebody went around and interviewed thousands of regular millionaires in the U.S. You know, when most people hear the word millionaire.
Tom Stanley.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in his research, he found that most of these millionaires who were unknown to the public, this is the guy that lives down the street from you that you had no idea because he drives a Camry. He has a very a simple house and an existence, but he's accumulated some wealth. And it said something to the effect of, I don't remember the exact number, 96% of all self-made millionaires make their bed every morning.
Wow.
So my simpleton mind thought, oh, great. If I make my bed, I'll be a millionaire. I'm thinking cause and effect. It didn't really resonate with me that that's just one of the disciplines that they've shown that can help them accumulate that type of wealth. But that was the reason I started doing it. I was like, well, if millionaires make their bed, I guess I'll do it. And 20 some years later, I still do it. I believe in starting the day with an act of discipline because discipline is required to be both happy and successful. I also believe in kind of decluttering. Like to me, you should take care of your space. You should take care of your environment and the things that you do. So I love starting my day with a very small win. It gives me a little bit of momentum. And then I parlay that into the next few things that I'll do, which many times is meditation.
That's so cool. So you have 3 little ones. I'm going to guess that their ages are between, is she 6, maybe 5 and 11?
Pretty close. My daughter's 7 and my sons are 9. I have twin sons.
Oh, they're twins. Okay.
Yeah, 7 and 9.
So they I didn't realize they were twins. And
yeah.
They're going to be looking to you for leadership. And I have 4 kids of my own.
Uh-huh.
And they're 12, 13, 17, and 19. And I started, you know, we're at the house. Okay, make your bed. You got to make your bed in the morning. First thing you get up, make your bed, get up. And then I would go on the road, and I said, I'm gonna make my bed. And my wife asked me, she says, like, you make your bed when you're on the road? You know, they have people that do that, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, yeah. I said, but I'm not a hypocrite,
right?
And if it's important to make your bed, it's important to make your bed.
Yes.
So I make my bed.
It doesn't matter.
So my kids know that it's legit and it's a habit now.
Yeah.
And there's so many benefits to it, the decluttering, and you come back to the room and everything's done, but you didn't, you did it. You feel like you're self-fulfilling.
For sure.
So
in harmony with my life philosophy, I don't believe in making anyone else's job any harder than it needs to be. So in fact, when I stay at hotels, I never use room service. I keep that thing on the door the whole time because I keep the room clean. And my goal is when I check out, I want my room to be the easiest room that they had to clean all day, that I don't want to make anyone's job harder. You know, the people that are here to clean up this hotel, yes, that is their job. That is how they provide for their family. And I'm not going to do anything that makes their job any more difficult. So I don't need another grown-up to come in and make my bed because I'm capable of it. Same reason when we're done here, when I'm finished with my water, I'm not just going to throw the bottle on the ground. Yes, the 4 Points will have someone that would pick it up and throw it away for me if I chose to do that. But I don't believe in that. And as I said before, how you do anything is how you do everything. And from a parenting standpoint, I never tell my kids to make their bed. I tell them why I make my bed, and they see me make my bed, and then they can make up their own decision. If they choose to go their whole lives and never make their bed, similar to when Duke loses, it's not going to have any effect on me because that's their choice. But I do believe that when they see me doing it and they ask me questions like why I do it, and I tell them the same reasons that I just told you, they'll be more inclined to make that decision on their own.
Yeah, that's cool. And you're actually, by not saying it, you're kind of saying it even more than someone that just says it, but then maybe doesn't do it themselves.
Yes.
So that's very cool. So these rituals, meditation. Now, being a high stress sales guy, meditation is extremely helpful.
Yes.
I'm not an expert on it.
And I'm not either.
Can you tell us, like some of the basics about it?
From my personal experience of being on the Headspace app, 651 straight days is the time of this recording, I have found that it allows me to start my day in a more present and grounded manner. It helps me improve my mindfulness. I know that once I leave the house, that it's going to be chaos all day, every day, that we're bombarded by so many different distractions and so much stuff going on, that this is a time where I have some control over my environment and I can have a little bit of serenity. And I think we should all be spending some quiet time just alone with our thoughts. If the first time that you have some peace and quiet and can think is when you put your head on the pillow to go to bed at night, I guarantee you're a person that doesn't sleep very well, because your mind will be going everywhere. So I choose to take some time to do that, to start my day. Not, this is preemptive. This is not, I need to react and, oh my God, life is getting out of control. Now I need some quiet time. I start with the quiet time so that I'm in much better control of everything else that's going on. And I think it's incredibly helpful. It allows me, like I said, to start in a mindful and grounded way. And it's 10 minutes a day. I mean, I'm not saying people need to sit, cross-legged for 45 minutes and hum to themselves 3 times a day. It's 10 minutes. And to me, that 10 minutes is one of the best investments that I can make in my own happiness and success.
Very cool. Well, you inspired me. I downloaded the app.
Awesome.
Headspace app, and I get the reminder every day.
Love it.
To do it. And, I'm working towards getting a couple of days in a row.
Great.
You did your TED Talk. And it was a good one. Appreciate the contribution there. And but I wanted to ask you, what did you learn? What did you learn personally from Itzler and the Hell on the Hill that you talked about? And maybe you can tell the audience what that is. Actually.
Sure. Yeah. So I did a TEDx talk a few years ago, and for me, looking back, hindsight always being 20/20, I was probably a little bit premature to try to do that because I'm a much more polished and eloquent speaker now than I was a couple years ago. But it was one of those things that was on my professional bucket list. Do a TEDx talk, do a TEDx talk. So as soon as I got an opportunity, I jumped at it. And one of the stories I told was about doing an activity called Hell on the Hill at Sarah Blakely and Jesse Itzler's house. And both of them are people that I just have so much respect and admiration for, not just for what they've built from a business standpoint, but they have a very connected marriage. They're very present parents to their children. They're just good people. If you talk to either one of them here in the lobby of the 4 Points, you would never know that their combined wealth is close to $2 billion because they're just down to earth, good, solid people. And that's what I like best about them. You talk about authentic. They were the same before they made their money as they have been after. They're the same when the lights and cameras are on than when they aren't. They're just really good people. And, one of the things that I've really always looked up to and respected about Jesse is he really doesn't believe in self-imposed limits. He believes that he can do anything, whether it's running 100 miles or building a $100 million business. He doesn't believe that he has any limitations. And in full transparency, some things that have happened in my past and some things, I find that I do occasionally have some self-limiting beliefs, and I'm trying to break through those. So I'm aware of them, and I'm trying to do some internal work so that I don't have them. If you told me right now, hey, Alan, I want to sign us up for a 100-mile race on foot, my initial reaction would be, I can't do that. And I don't like the fact that that would be my initial reaction. So I'm trying to do some internal work to be able to break through that. So instead I would say, you know what, Awesome Mike, I'm down, sign me up. I don't know if I can do it, but I'm not scared to try, and I'm going to do the best I can. So let's go ahead and do this thing together. So that's one thing that he's had a profound impact, is that he's wired to believe he can do anything, and I'm trying to rewire myself so that I have the same belief.
Yeah, I think a tip of the hat to David Goggins would be appropriate.
Absolutely.
At this point, too, that dude he was very inspirational and influential to Isler's
incredible
deal. What did you say? You said something to Wojo, and you're like, hey, how much more you got to go? And he said, one more
one rep,
30 more times.
Yes.
What else did you get from Wojo? and the reason why, he was a Duke disciple,
yes,
played on the team, became an assistant coach.
I'm going to go on record now and say I think he's going to be Coach K's replacement. I don't want to take us on a tangent. That's my gut feeling. I think he is Duke basketball, but yes.
Wow. He would be great. He would be great.
He's a good man.
I don't see anybody on the bench now. I don't think that's the route. I think they have to go somewhere else.
Yes, to get some head coaching experience.
Yeah, and I think Johnny Dawkins actually.
I think Johnny Dawkins is absolutely in the conversation
too. Yeah.
I think Tommy Amaker is. I think Chris Collins could be. There's several. Yeah. The Duke coaching tree is long.
It's deep.
But yes, but back to what you said.
Yeah.
What Wojo is, he's been a friend for over a decade. He's a great guy. And that was basically what he said was, don't worry about rep number 100. Just worry about rep 71.
Yeah, so
all you got to do is the next one. And I would say this to basketball players all the time. A average basketball player goes in to shoot 500 shots, say in the morning for practice.
Okay.
A really good basketball player goes in to make 500 shots. An elite basketball player goes in to make one shot 500 separate times. And that might sound like verbal sleight of hand and semantics, but it's not. It's the ability to be present enough to know that the only shot that matters right now is this one shot. This is the only shot I'm going to shoot all day. I'm going to do everything textbook correct with my footwork and my form. I'm going to do it at game speed. This is the only shot that matters. And then once you shoot that one, now you do the next one. Same thing with sales. If you go into it and say, you know what, to meet my quota, I got to make 20 calls today, you're going to be a mediocre salesperson. If you go in and say, hey, I've got to close 20 today, you're still going to be mediocre. If you go in and say, this next call, everything in my life depends on this next call and my ability to solve their problem and serve them on the other end, to show them that what I'm selling is a good fit for them. I'm not trying to trick them. I'm not trying to manipulate them. I'm not trying to coerce them. I'm going to get to the bottom of what they really need. And if what I have to offer is a good fit for them, we're going to make some sweet music together. And this is the only call I'm making today. It's the only call I'm going to make for the rest of my life. My family depends on me making this one call. And then when that call's done, then you do the next one. So at the end of the day, you'll still have made 20 calls, but because you're so focused on each one, it's like treat every client as if they're your only client. We've all heard that before, but how many people actually live that? Not many.
Dude, that's rich. Treat every situation as the shot, the sales call, not just a sales call.
Yes.
I love
because when you get to the end of the game and there's 3 seconds left and the game's tied, you only get one shot. Then
it's real and it's
you can't. Yeah, you can't say, "Oh, I'm going to have 20 chances to shoot this one." That's all that matters.
Yeah, I'm really going to focus on this one now because you don't have that muscle to focus.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would always laugh because players would say, "Hey, coach, I got it this morning and I took 500 shots." And I'm like, "Well, that's great. I can take 500 shots. How many times did it go in?" We don't need more shot takers. We need more shot makers. The name of the game is put the ball in the basket. So let's make sure we're measuring what it is that we want to see.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about the book. And,
sure.
This is it's a new book, and but the content is not new. These are age-tested principles that are in here on peak performance and on the best being the best. Tell us about the book. Why did you write this book like now? And why is it appropriate now? What caused you to kind of say, you know what, that would be good to get out there in a book form?
I wrote it for several reasons. One, I have read so many books that have had a profound impact on my life. So many people that I've never met. You mentioned Stephen Covey. Never met him, but his work has had a profound impact on my life. So as a voracious reader, I thought all of these people have poured into me and they don't even know it. Boy, if I could write something that could pour into someone else, if I could write something that someone else goes, man, I'm a little bit different now because I read something Alan wrote, that I view the world slightly different. I just think that'd be a great way to pay it forward and to serve others. So part of it was kind of the selfish reason reason of I wanted to put something out there, kind of in terms of legacy that could benefit others, because that's what people have done for me. It also was a professional bucket list item. I've always known that I've had a book inside of me, so to bring it to fruition was kind of cool. When I made the leap from coaching to the corporate speaking world, I also needed to really organize all of my content and get hyper focused on what my message was. So the act of writing a book forced me to do that. In fact, if I didn't even publish this, if this never saw the light of day, it was still worth every minute that I put into it, because it got me hyper focused on my message. And then lastly, I also did it to build credibility in the space. That I spent 20 years in the basketball world developing a reputation and a resume and credibility. And now I make a leap over to the corporate world, where honestly, a few years ago, no one had ever heard of me before. So it was a way to establish some credibility in the space. So all of those reasons are why I did Raise Your Game. And I'm already working on a second book, because it was such an enjoyable process, and the feedback I've gotten has been outstanding, that I look forward to serving others in the future with a follow-up.
Yeah, I enjoyed it, and I got bits and pieces off of it online, and I appreciate you giving me this autographed copy of it. It'll be a fine addition to my library. Is there one thing, if I only had one thing to change or to do or to improve or to implement from your book as a high performance person, whether it's a salesperson or an athlete, what would it be?
It would be what is chapter 1, which is self-awareness. And it would be to make sure that you recognize that self-awareness is the foundation to which the rest of your house is built, personally or professionally, individually or organizationally. Whether you're in sales or you're a high school basketball player, you have to know who you are, what you do well, the combination of everything that's required of being self-aware, because then that lays the foundation for you then to be able to build an emotional intelligence that allow you to do all of these things at a higher level. Continuing to use the basketball reference as a theme, a player that takes a bad shot, that's not that big of a deal. A player that takes a bad shot and doesn't know that it was a bad shot, that's the one that will cost you. That's the one that keeps a coach up at night. If you take a bad shot and you look over at me and go, "Coach, that was my bad," I can live with that. I might be temporarily mad at you, but I can live with that. If you take a bad shot and you have no idea that that was a bad shot, now we've got a problem. So self-awareness is absolutely key to anything that we want to be successful and significant in.
And how do you go about developing that? I mean, it almost seems counterintuitive. If you don't know what you don't know.
You definitely don't.
So is it by having a coach or teammates, or how do you do that?
It's funny. It is very counterintuitive, because one of the initial steps to self-awareness is to ask others. But you're not asking people on social media. You're not asking some random stranger here in the lobby. You're asking the people that know you the best. Because a blind spot, by definition, is something we can't see. But we have to have the humility to acknowledge that we do have blind spots, and we need to reach out to those that can see them for us. And those are the folks that we trust, but they love us, they support us, they care about us, but they also care about us enough to hold us accountable and tell us the things that we need to hear, not just the things that we want to hear. There's enough of those people anyway. So asking others, and what I always use as an example is listening. If I think I'm a world-class listener, but you ask the 5 people closest to me and they say, "No, Alan is an awful listener," well, guess what? Then I'm probably not a good listener. But what that really highlights is I have very low self-awareness, that I see myself different than the way the world sees me. As funny as it would be, if I told you I'm a bad listener and the 5 people that know me best said, "Yeah, he's a bad listener," ironically, that means I have very high self-awareness.
Your potential.
I know what I'm not good at, or I know what I'm good at. So self-awareness is absolutely the key to everything that we want.
And so once you're aware, do you believe in the camp of, work on these areas that you're vulnerable, that you're weak in, or are you the camp of, work on your strengths?
If you made me pick one, I'm absolutely a double down on your strengths guy. And the reason I say, I lean towards that, there are applicable weaknesses that I do think one needs to be cognizant of. But generally speaking, there will be things that you're naturally very good at. There'll be things that you have a very high passion for. And where those two things intersect, the more time you can spend in that strength zone, the higher your performance will be in any area. But if you do have a bad habit that is undermining your ability to do all of those things, like not being a very good listener in sales, I don't know a single sales professional that's not a world-class listener. So if listening is something that you're not very good at, but you aspire to be really good in sales, I think that would be a weakness that you would need to focus on and work on. But generally speaking, I think our country and our society puts way too much on trying to approve weaknesses, because more times than not, at best, you'll only be mediocre at them instead of being elite. And one of the examples I use in the NBA, outside of LeBron and KD, and there's a dozen guys that can do just about everything. Outside of those dozen guys, every single person in the NBA is a role player. The other 450 guys, they have one specific skill set that they do at an incredibly high level, and they double down on that. I don't know how many of your listeners focus on basketball, but when I say the name JJ Redick or Kyle Korver, those guys are known for being dead-eye shooters. That's what they do. They do that at an elite level. JJ Redick is a mediocre ball handler. He's a mediocre defender. Kyle Korver is not much of a rebounder. And if those two guys spent all of their time trying to get those skill sets up above mediocre, they'd be wasting their time. You know what Kyle Korver and JJ Redick do when they're in the gym 99% of the time?
Shoot.
Catch and shoot. Catch and shoot, catch and shoot. And that's what's made them who they are. So I would say skew more towards making your strengths even stronger, but still keep an eye open for applicable weaknesses that could be undermining your ability to do that.
There was a guy that I was in the Army with back in the 1900s.
Yes.
As my oldest daughter would tell me. And he was a great basketball player. Each of our companies had a pickup basketball team, and it was funny because we were everybody sitting around, and they were getting on him because he never passes the ball.
Yeah.
And he said, "Man, that's what all the four players are for."
Love it.
Because he was a shooter. He was a star. And anyways, it was funny. Remind me of that. But,
I love it.
Everyone plays their role.
How are we doing on time? I just need to make sure.
Yep,
yeah.
we're good.
Okay. Is it 11:30?
Almost. It's
okay.
In
a few minutes we'll have to close because I got a couple things before we take the bus.
You got it. So I want to ask you, like where you're at now is you're giving trainings and you're doing speaking and you're traveling around. And if folks want to bring you in, we'll put your website information in the show notes and such so they can do that. But
cool.
Where do you see yourself in the next 10, 20 years?
You know what's actually interesting? For the first time in my life, I can't answer that. I can tell you where I want to be for the next year and maybe two, and that's doing exactly what I'm doing right now, because I'm loving the challenge of being a more accomplished speaker. I love the work that I do during my workshops and trainings where we get to roll up our sleeves and actually put some work in and have an intimate environment. So I'm so focused on getting to be the best I can be at that. And once I get there, not that I'll be complacent by any means, but then I'll take the blinders off and start to look at some other things, because I don't know where I'm going to be. I know that serving others is something that makes my heart sing and is something that I really enjoy. So I can almost guarantee you that whatever I do will always be in service of others. But the exact path, not even sure.
Well, that's a great place. And I know that you're you're really enjoying the fruit that you're bearing right now, and you've worked hard to get to this position. So I congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
I have a couple of signature questions, but I'll kind of cut to the chase on one in particular.
Sure.
And the question is usually, if you could pick up the phone and you call and on the end of the line is your own self, but 25 years old. So you just graduated Elon. What would you tell yourself? And I want to ask you that, but before I do, I want to say, you had a chance to kind of do that. Like you went back to your high school and you gave that commencement speech, and you said, find your calling, invest your time. And you gave out some great kind of, call it overarching philosophies there. What specifically would you tell young Alan as he's walking down in graduation from college, if you could talk to him right now?
The part that I think is so funny about this, and I love this question, is the thing that I would say to young Alan, he probably wouldn't be open to hearing, because young Alan knew everything. Young Alan didn't need any help. He already had all of the answers, which I laugh because I think a lot of people in their early 20s think they have all of the answers. And, now 20 years later, I not only realize how much I didn't know then, I realize how much more I still need to know. And that would be the thing that I would tell myself would be, just be more open-minded. Be willing to listen to anyone and everyone that has something of value they can share. And even if it doesn't fit into your filter and convictions, you can still learn from them. I'm a big believer, and I tell young coaches this all the time. I should be able to go watch any basketball practice in the world at any level, and I should learn something. I'm either going to affirm what I should be doing, or I'm going to learn some things that I shouldn't be doing. But either way, I'm going to be open to it. So I had some very narrow mindsets. And at this time, it was mostly on training philosophy, like the best way to train an athlete. And if you weren't in my camp and aligned with how I believed it, I wasn't listening to you. And worse, I would argue with you until we were both red in the face. So I would just tell myself to be much more open and to study things outside of my direct area. One of the things I do now as a keynote speaker, I study stand-up comedy and I study hip hop. I study two different forms of spoken word, two different groups of people that are professional orators, and I try to learn from them on timing and body language and inflection and in tone and in rhythm. And I try to look at those genres because there's things I can learn from them to help me get better at what I do. And back when I was younger, I didn't do any of that. I had a very one-track mind, and I was so razor focused that I had the blinders on like a racehorse.
One of my favorite quotes is that wisdom is wasted on the old.
Yeah.
You're sounding kind of old there, but it's a good thing because you're not. So.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you for coming on the show today and for all of your positive and productive tips, both in your book and in your speeches. Ladies and gentlemen, he's all over the internet, iTunes. Many people have interviewed him, and even his YouTube channel has got a lot of good stuff on there. We all appreciate you and your work and wish you much fortune and success both now and in the future.
Thank you.
Alan, as we say on the Awesome Wholesaler Experience podcast, it's about the journey, and I wish you well on yours. I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thanks, man.
Hey, thanks everyone for listening. And if you haven't done it already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. It's right here or somewhere. And that little bell too, so you'll be notified every time that we drop a new episode. While awesome ratings and reviews are never expected, they are indeed appreciated. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks for supporting the show. And thanks for being awesome. Good night, everybody.